First speaker is Sarah Carlson, followed by Deborah. Rianne?
What's the name?
Good evening.
Hi. Good evening.
My name is Sarah Carlson. I'm a local resident here, and I am also a local real estate agent. We have a problem. The housing crisis is real. Unemployment is down, and yet our homelessness is up. We have a 100,000 unit deficit in housing units needed for the current population in San Diego County, which spreads into our community, and that's not addressing any deficits from previous years. We're looking for a solution. Tenants and homeowners are looking for answers, and as affordability changes, we have young people and elderly people looking for houses they can afford. Many of my clients can't afford what is available. Homeowners are looking for income streams that can assist in the ability to make a mortgage payment that has a higher interest rate and purchase price. Allowing ADUs has helped many neighborhoods like La Mesa provide some relief, and will allow for growth and increased economic stability to the businesses of this community. As a resident and a professional working and living in this community, I see this as an integral need for our future. While the state and the feds work to create options through grants and loan programs to help encourage homeownership and relieve some of the housing crisis, this is a great right now solution, in my opinion, as a professional in this industry.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Deborah. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. I apologize.
That's quite all right. I'm Deborah Norwood Ruane.
Ruane, thank you very
Right.
much. I apologize.
Don't worry. I represent Housing You Matters, which is a nonpartisan, broad-based coalition that works toward finding housing solutions for all levels of need. Housing You Matters is extremely supportive of staff's recommendation to amend Title 24 to replace existing regulations for ADUs and add regulations for the junior ADUs. This request not only is in alignment with your city's strategic goals to revitalize neighborhoods and create safe and affordable homes for all current and future residents, it provides another option for students, seniors, in-home health care, and other people with a tight budget to afford a safe home. In the case of junior ADUs, may even enable a family to stay in their home. Furthermore, it aligns with efforts at the state level promoting ADUs and can count towards your regional housing needs goals. Housing You Matter supports the efforts of the City of La Mesa to provide yet another tool for its citizens to provide safe housing options, and we urge you to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Barrett Tetlow, followed by Aaron Amberling. Good evening.
Hi, Barrett Tetlow. I live at 5866 Cows Mountain Boulevard with my wife, and here also just to support the ordinance. I think it's an excellent ordinance the way it was written. And ADUs are really an excellent first step to dealing with the housing crisis. We've heard a lot of the speakers talking about it as well. But one of the beauties of ADUs is it's a dual affordable housing. First off, it's usually naturally occurring affordable housing. Also, it usually will not only help the person who's renting the ADU, but also the mortgage-burdened homeowner as well too. So it's a double whammy. And some of the barriers that are there for ADU production. First is government regulations, which you're dealing with right now today with this ordinance. The second is government fees, and the third is design and construction cost. So while this ordinance is great today, it's sort of the first step. I would recommend that you go farther. There's a lot of cities that have been waiving fees for sewer and water hookup, typically are the most expensive, but in some cases you can see the government fee is almost a third of the cost of the ADU ordinance itself. And so recently, the County of San Diego has set aside $11 million for waiving fees for 5 years. And the City of San Diego, we've waived all diff fees completely and sewer and water fees for, it was a pilot project that's kind of for a number of years. Also, SANDAG has recently, or at least the SANDAG Executive Board has voted to waive the $2,400 RTCP fees, and I think the SANDAG full board will be voting on that upcoming. So I would, pass this today and then recommend staff, you maybe ask staff to look at ways that could be waiving the fees. Sometimes with sewer and water, they're enterprise fees, so you need to kind of backfill them. At least that's what the county has done. Also, I would look at design cost. The city of Encinitas has permit-ready ADUs, and that are saving homeowners on average $8,000 to $14,000. The response in Encinitas has just been overwhelming. They've had two meetings with potential homeowners. Both of them were filled to the brim. There's another meeting coming up in Encinitas, a public workshop on March 11th. You might have some council members or staff attend as well, but the response from the Encinitas has been overwhelming with these permit-ready ADUs also reduced. And so the more that you can reduce the barriers, the more production you have, the more it eases the housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Ammerling, followed by Jared Bassler.
Hello.
Good evening.
I've been watching that marvelous Miss Maisel, so every time I see a mic, I feel like you have to get into like a stand-up routine about your life. It's very difficult. He's seen it. But so I am almost basically entirely in favor of this, but I think there are two holes really that we need to talk about in this legislation, and that is the lack of the owner occupancy regulations and short-term 30-day rental. And either on their own is not that bad, but combined together, I think it leaves room for exploitation. And everyone knows you make laws to prevent the bad actors, not for the good actors. So there's nothing preventing investors from coming in, buying a house, adding multiple units, and turning it into an Airbnb. And we do know that investors raise the housing prices, so that actually hurts housing affordability, and Airbnbs raise rent and housing prices, so that also hurts housing affordability. So I think if we're going to add these ADU things to allow people to come in, build for their grandparents or for rentals to afford the mortgage, that is great for the homeowner. But what do we do to prevent, again, investors from coming in, turning it into mini dorms, which I know some people don't think is a problem, but if you look at number 6 on your item, that's literally someone suggesting a 300-unit dorm in La Mesa. So that is in West La Mesa an issue. So what do we do to prevent investors coming in from turning these into mini dorms or turning them into Airbnb houses? So I think either way, some serious consideration should be into, like, how do we do owner occupancy? Is it owner occupancy if it's a 30-day, under 30-day rental? So that maybe is some kind of solution. But there needs to be some talk about that, because just leaving both off the table, I think, just really leaves us to exploitation. And as people know, it's a capitalist society. You can make money. You try to find the way to exploit the system to the biggest profitable, ability. And sometimes that's to the detriment of neighbors in the community, and not to the betterment of, if that's a word, of the neighborhood. So just as we're considering this, again, it's a very commendable thing. It helps affordable housing, and I'm for it. However, we do need to take a serious consideration on owner occupancy regulations and or short-term rentals and how those interplay together. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared Bassler, followed by Matt Adams.
Hi, Jared Basler. I'm here as a resident, a local small business owner, as well as a member, subject matter expert for the ADU Coalition here in San Diego. And I want to say we fully support this ordinance moving forward as written. I think the council and the the Planning Commission did a great job at really looking at what the intent of the state law was and looking inward to the things that have prevented ADUs from being developed here in La Mesa previously. And so you've really taken the first step in this. As Barrett said, really there's 3 things. There's the ordinance itself, there's fees, and then there's the process. And so this is the first step. The next step is fees. They don't need to be free. They just need to be predictable. So homeowners know exactly what they're going to pay moving through the process. With regard to the process, there's many different cities across the state that are taking steps that have, the precedent has not yet been set. We see things in Encinitas where they're giving away permit-ready plans. The issue is that that's extremely misleading to homeowners because those are not permit-ready. There's still a large portion of work that has to go in for the site-specific conditions. We have a large group of professionals here in the San Diego area that are ready, willing, and trying to put these through, get these built here in La Mesa and across San Diego. And so really when we talk about process, it's about making the building permit process as simple as possible for ADUs so that the existing professional community can do it as cheaply as possible. Homeowners who are doing this are essentially one-time developers. And so by providing free plans that have a lot of work to still go into them, as the Encinitas plans do, as some of the other jurisdictions have proposed, that really sets a precedent that can end up hurting these long term. And so put the tools in place for the professionals to be able to do what they do best, and the costs will come down. Costs are high because it takes too long and there's too many variables in the process. So as you move forward, I want to say thank you for this ordinance you're looking at today. Please move it forward as written, and please move towards a process that helps everybody through faster. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Matt Adams, followed by Richard Hammett.
Good evening, Matthew Adams. I'm representing the San Diego Building Industry Association. We're an association of 700 member companies and a workforce of over 30,000 men and women, many of which live in the city of La Mesa. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the proposals as presented by staff. You've heard it already. You'll continue to hear it as evening goes on. We have a housing crisis, and it's real. And it's significant, and it requires our immediate attention and immediate action. And it's part of a broader, comprehensive strategy to address the housing crisis, not only here in La Mesa, but everywhere. Because we've had all this talk about housing and the importance and the need to have more. Sadly, the trend is that overall housing production is going down. And that's something that has to be addressed. You heard the gentleman just before me eloquently talk about the need for regulatory reform, fee consistency, and fee relief. It's all part of a more comprehensive strategy that's going to take some time to work itself out. But this city, as with other cities, is focused on that, and I commend all of you here for doing that. ADUs and the junior units, what's important about those is that they're more cost effective. They're naturally affordable. It's something that we all have to focus on. My daughter moved out of California for the simple reason housing. Couldn't afford to live here. So when she got married, they moved away. I don't want to see that happen to my other two children that are here. If we could put things like ADUs in place, that's a good thing. And it's a reasonable thing, and it won't be very disruptive to communities because of their size and their proximity to transit, which is essential, and it's a major goal. I ask that you adopt the plan as proposed and monitor its results over the coming years. See what's working, see what doesn't work. And then if some corrections are necessary, at least those corrections could be made based on facts and not fear that a lot of people in various jurisdictions have expressed and have stalled out other cities that are trying to do more about housing. Let's make fact-based solutions. So we ask that you implement this, continue to monitor it, and then if any course corrections are made, at least it's done based on facts. So thank you for your work here tonight, and we're very supportive of what's being discussed.
Thank you. Richard Hammett, followed by Robert Calloway.
Hi,
Good
I'm
evening.
Rich Hammett. I'm at 3820 Shirlene Place in the very southwest corner of the city. I penciled out. I took this and said, what part of the market would I play? And I penciled out, if I were to take my 6,000 square foot lot with a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,670 square foot home, single story, with a 2-car garage, and I would have put an ADU in the back and a JADU in the front, converting the bedroom, I could probably come up with about $210,000 in additional cost. If I took that and financed that, and I added the property tax and monthly insurance, and very importantly, I really want you to understand this. This is my point of being here. Adding a property manager, a licensed professional property manager. I'd probably come up with $14,706 a year additional money in my pocket. after a $32,400 a year gross. That's $14,706 before considering the impact of Schedule E on my federal income tax return, because you know Schedule E rules have changed and they give a little bit more benefit now to people in real estate. Going into this, I approve it, but I want to really caution you and advise you to look at the business licensing, that you have a separate business license for the long-term rents and a separate business license for the short-term rents. You're going to get marijuana smoke, you're going to get noise, you're going to get some parking issues, but it's behaviors. Rental property is all about getting the income and making sure people play nice together. And I think the way to enforce that at this point in the process is to approve this ordinance, but yet go forward and strengthen the business license and utilize the business license to shut people down. If you get 3 or 4 complaints on a property and the neighbors are real unhappy, pull the license and the property sits vacant. That will motivate whoever is managing it to be able to keep the behaviors under control. I think that's what everybody's concerned about. So, increased income for the homeowner in my segment of the market, and professional property management to make sure the behaviors are taken control through the use of the business license process. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Calloway, followed by Rebecca Rudd.
We're all going to come together.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Thank you. Robert Calloway, President for the Pacific Southwest Association of Realtors. And we just want to let you know that we strongly support and approval of this measure because, as you know, right now, California is in a housing shortage crisis. And so from the state level, the California Association of Realtors and the state, if we don't address our housing needs now, California is subject to become a renter majority state by 2025. So your measure to do this, to create the ADUs, is going to help relieve it. It won't solve the problem, but it will definitely relieve it, and I highly recommend that you guys support this, and we're here to help you in any way we can with educating your community, because with the real estate professionals to be able to make sure and understand, and also I think bringing in the tax assessor to make sure that they understand the tax implications from that will definitely help you guys out. And thank you very much, and we look forward to what you have to bring for us.
Thank you very much. Rebecca Rudd, followed by Tracy Hollingsworth.
It's actually rude. It sounds really bad, but it's rude.
I apologize.
Just call me rude. It's military. So I know a lot of people have spoken, and I agree with everything that they've said thus far for the most part. I do think, and Encinitas does have the great plan to have certain things, and I think it's important to have the implementation in place, because it's great to have this, because there is a housing crisis in California. There's a crisis in La Mesa. There's a crisis everywhere. I sell real estate. I'm a realtor. And I actually have sold a lot of houses to people that like the ADU already in place, because a lot of the younger people can't afford houses, and that's a way to make it more affordable. So I don't think that you're just going to have a crazy little people renting everything. I think it's expensive to live here. And a lot of people do get older, and they want their family members there. It allows a lot of options for people here in the city. And La Mesa is an older city. I mean, Mount Helix, it's full of ADUs. But I think that implementation is key, and I think that if we're going to have this process, I think there should be certain steps, and everybody knows what they are, because people don't know how much it costs to add plumbing and electric and all this other little permitting process. It's a great idea in theory, and I think it should just be like Barrett said, everything should be in place, and people should know what the cost is, so it can be more effective, and so everybody knows what they need to do to get this thing going. But I think it is needed, and I think housing is a crisis, and I think this is a great way to allow more things to be built.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tracy Hollingsworth. Good evening.
Tracy Morgan Hollingworth with the Pacific Southwest Association of Realtors, and thank you. This is a marvelous ordinance. I was telling Matt Adams, it's one of the purest ADU ordinances that we've seen, because there are a lot of them that are rolling around out there. What you don't know is that we've done a lot of work on some of these different housing issues, such as density bonuses. We got a grant from our National Association of Realtors to work with Circulate San Diego to try to, find new tools for the toolbox. And we also recently, and I know I'm not on subject here, but recently got a grant to help the regional chamber, or the East County Chamber, to develop a homeless resources website. And they just launched it today. So I wanted to give the City Council
Wow.
It's called EC Assist, and it's going to go a long way to help both the public and cities and all the different, agencies out there to really deal with the homeless situation. So we don't want to exacerbate the issue by not building housing. The ADU 10 and 10B ordinances are really fabulous, and we really applaud all your effort on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our speakers. Yes.
One
Oh,
written
one written,
comment
okay.
from Mrs. Schmitz. Please err on the side of caution. Do not do away with owner-occupied and parking for ADUs. We don't want to look like the center of El Cajon.
So that concludes our speakers. So discussion among council. Yes.
I just want to note that we did have 3 other public comments. 2 were concerned with the parking and also with law enforcement, whether it would be enough for the housing need, and 1 was supportive of the ordinance as adopted.
Okay. Mr. Baber?
Can I have Carrie come back up? And I don't know, Greg, can you get to page 261 of the report? It's the map that Carrie and I were talking about before. So you can see it up there. I can see it on mine, but it'd be easier if you showed it up there. So Carrie, now that thank you for helping me find the map. Is the rule we're proposing that if you're within a half mile of transit, you don't need to add parking to have an ADU?
Right.
That's correct.
Okay. When the map comes up, I'll show you something.
261.
261. I'm going to have to manually show it to you then. So, Carrie, you know this map, yes?
Yep.
If I ever teach a class on figures of speech, oh, there it is. I'm going to pull this map up and say, this is what the figure of speech mean, the exception swallowing the rule is. There's only 3 tiny sections of La Mesa that this doesn't apply to. A tiny bit in the northeast corner, a northwest corner, a little bit bigger section in the northeast corner, and then the area I sort of call the foothills of Helix. Mm-hmm. Did you consider, when you were approving this, just making it the whole city? Is there any compelling reason that these people who are in these little pockets have to add parking? I know they're a half mile away from it, but I could see a model where the city would have a easier to understand ordinance if it was just everywhere. Did you even discuss this?
It's certainly been thought of. Just once we, I think like you did, once we saw the map and saw that it had occupied most of the city, we definitely had that thought. I think we kind of came back to the idea is that you don't need as much parking because you have access to transit. And really, once you get, especially in the Helix area, but you're getting to where it's more than a half a mile to a transit stop. And really, that's when folks they stop walking or getting on their bike to go to the bus stop, and they start getting in their car.
So the subcommittee was Mr. Parent, and so did you consider keeping these little pockets as is there a compelling government reason to have those pockets?
Yeah, I don't think so, right? But I think my thinking was that that if what we proposed would be substantial, would cover the large percentage of a large majority of homeowners and potential homeowners, and that if we did that, then we wouldn't be far from what the requirement was anyway from state law. I would certainly be open to including the totality of the city, but I don't think we have to do that in order to make a meaningful improvement to new potential homes.
And as Councilman Parrott referenced, we were also looking at state law, what it requires. And the one thing that we did change, was that how we define transit. We didn't say major connector or anything. So I'm not opposed to changing it either, but I think it's following state law with the addition that we consider a bus stop to be that.
If MTS changed a bus route and put it up into the north east part of the city, that would change this parking requirement too?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, automatically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I mean, maybe there's a majority to just get rid of that those pockets. I'd certainly be comfortable with that.
I'll see what other people think. When you think about having a government rule, you want it to be easy to understand, and when the exception virtually swallows the rule, why not just make it simple? But we'll hear what everyone else thinks.
Did we consider when we're doing that, obviously not topography too, so you're talking about the foothills, walking the half mile in flat as opposed to now it's more than a half mile? Does that, I'm talking to you, Mr. Baber, because you raised it. Is that a consideration?
I don't ask Carrie, it's, I think it sounds as if the state rule says, well, if you can get to transit within a half mile, you don't need to park, and therefore we don't have a parking requirement. I think it would be a little, when you're way up in our far corner up there, yes, that's a harder walk for sure. But I don't.
It doesn't express specifics. It's just the half mile.
Correct. So the state law says that you can't require parking within a half mile of public transit without defining public transit. But I think importantly also it does say that a locality can require lesser parking standard than that if they so choose.
Okay.
And let's just clarify too, it doesn't mean that someone isn't going to build parking if they think they need to in order to rent their unit, right? And so I think it's very likely that if someone chooses to do an ADU in one of these places that isn't accessible to transit, that they're only going to do that if they think that they can accommodate a vehicle, because otherwise they're not going to be able to rent it, or they're going to be building something when they don't intend to rent it. They're going to have their mother-in-law live there, or something like that. Someone who can't drive. And so I think that's a likely. Anyway, so I think that's just something to flag for folks. That just because there's no minimum doesn't mean that people won't choose to accommodate vehicles on their properties.
I just want to make sure I heard you right. You said mother-in-laws can't drive. Is that what you just said?
Well, some mother-in-laws can't drive. Some
make sure I heard that correctly.
Yeah.
So you didn't say.
I think many of them do drive, though. I mean, just for the record.
Just wanted to make sure that I heard you correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes, Dr. Weber.
So I just want to commend staff and the subcommittee on working so hard at this. As everyone has said, we do have a housing crisis. It is extremely expensive to live in California as well. Many homeowners would love the opportunity to have an accessory dwelling unit to also help supplement their income. And like someone spoke earlier, a lot of people would like to be able to have their family stay here. So they, allow their families to move in the home and they move into the accessory dwelling unit. So I'm very encouraged by this plan. There are a few things that I am concerned with, and I have to agree with Aaron and actually question, why did we take the requirement for owner occupancy out? When, I was listening to all of the speakers talk today, they talked about how it would decrease on our issue of housing availability and how it will help out the homeowner, which is true. So what was the rationale behind taking out the requirement of the homeowner occupancy?
I can subcommittee to subcommittee can talk to that.
I can address that. So I think there's a couple of reasons. Primarily is that I think we want to encourage this kind of investment, and someone who maybe they own a home today and they're living in it and they want to build an accessory dwelling unit, but they're planning to downsize when their kids move out, right? We want them to be able to, but they're going to downsize, but then keep the property and rent it. They may not choose to make the investment in the ADU in the first instance if they know that they're not going to be able to rent it out when they move out of their property, because they would no longer be the owner occupant, right?
So I guess my question, so this is to build an ADU, correct? Not to sustain it.
Well, I think it's for both. That would be so. Usually, owner occupancy requirements on these sorts of things say that you can neither build nor rent out. Actually, I don't even think it's on the building. It's that you can't rent out the accessory unit unless there's a resident who's an owner of either the ADU or the primary building.
Are we sure on that?
Well, it depends on how you want to structure the ordinance, but
I can speak to that. When it says owner occupancy, that's a ongoing operational condition. So it would mean if we had an owner occupancy requirement that throughout the lifetime of that existing, an owner would have to occupy either the primary unit or one of the accessory units if they have both the JADU and the ADU.
Okay.
So the other answer to that too is that just to clarify is that I'll use my own example. I'm a renter.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the city of La Mesa are renters. I rent a single-family home that is very small. It's like less than 800 square feet, and it's in a relatively large lot. The people who own my home could choose to build an accessory dwelling unit to increase their income as an investment, but they wouldn't be allowed to if there was an owner occupancy requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my rationale for this is to make sure if you make sure you don't have that requirement, then it allows people to make that choice to invest in more homes and more doors.
I think to that point, if I was a renter, I might feel a little uncomfortable with the owner being able to put an ADU, because if I'm there with my family and we're used to playing in the backyard, or I'm not there with my family but I'm used to doing things in the backyard, and then the owner decides, who lives somewhere else, that they're going to put an ADU in the backyard, that really changes the dynamic of my lifestyle and potentially my family's lifestyle. So from a renter standpoint, I don't know if I would be comfortable with that.
Sure, yeah, and I certainly wouldn't want that in my backyard today. Most of probably all rental lease agreements are for the entire property. So I'm not leasing the house; I'm leasing the entire property, and that's normal. That's what everyone who's renting a single family home does. So now my landlord could choose not to renew our lease and do something different, right? They could do that just as they could in any circumstance, but they are not, and any other landlord would not have the ability to just go into a leasehold and to build something without the permission of the leaseholder.
Right, and if you're on a year-to-year, lease, that could potentially change. But I'm just saying, if you are on a year-to-year lease, and then the next year your owner says, "I'm going to potentially do this," it can be very disruptive to the renter's lifestyle. The other question I have: so how, if we implemented this ordinance as it is, allowing for not the requirement of homeowners, how would we know that this wouldn't encourage other outside investors or businesses to come in and start purchasing homes here in La Mesa to, put in these ADUs and junior accessory dwelling units? And we see that's happened in other areas in San Diego County, so how would we prevent that from happening?
I think you raised some really good points on the owner occupancy part, and it's competing theories. When we were deciding at the subcommittee level, what are we going to do here? We thought about people who would want to move to their condo by the beach, but keep their property in La Mesa for when their kids grow older and want to take it at some point. So that's an interest, and we erred on the side of providing more housing. And again, with your questions as to what stops investors from coming in, I'll tell you what stops them. I'm in the real estate development industry. It doesn't there are better ways to make money than buying a house and adding an ADU. That's not going to be an extremely profitable measure for anyone. I certainly, especially in La Mesa with our prices, I certainly would not be scoping, looking around for property to buy and add an ADU as my rental income. I think that that's in part market-driven and highly market-driven. And you may get some people that are speculators and do it. You may not. But I think the prices of housing is so high that it's doubtful that you would get that. And again, we in the subcommittee erred on the side of providing housing and providing opportunities for homeowners. And Carrie, if you'd like to elaborate.
No, I think you covered that very well. Thank you.
Well, just so getting back to this, is there some type of fail-safe for control? So if it does, we review it in a year and there's holes in it, what can we do to modify this?
So I want to suggest something on that. I think it's a fair question about the potential of investors and displacement and raising things, and so and you have seen that as being an issue in certain other areas, right? So I think if the UC system decides to open up UC La Mesa, then like we would probably need to be thinking about that, because maybe the sort of experiences that the college area is having around SDSU might be replicated here. I think if we were, if we don't vote to implement our climate action plan later tonight, and the sea level rises and La Mesa becomes a coastal city, then we might have the same sort of high demand for short-term rentals that you see in the beach communities in Encinitas. And so I think if and when those things or even less exciting things happen, I think we can and should consider those. But right now, if you look to see how many Airbnbs are operating in La Mesa at any given time, it's hard to do an exact analysis. But if you just sort of look like what's available tomorrow or next week or 4 months from now, it's usually about a dozen, right? And so it's not the sort of thing where at this point there doesn't seem to be a big market pressure to do that. There are some, like some people are doing that. Some people are probably doing that with their ADUs, right? But it's not like it's not a large number. And so what I would propose is that if we start seeing those kinds of issues to bubble up, then we could talk about restrictions for short-term rentals. We could start talking about other things that can address the problems that may occur. But my recommendation to you all would be let's not prevent what we want to have happen with some based on some fears about what we don't have really good evidence to suggest that will happen.
You want to finish, Dr.?
No, go ahead.
Mr. Baber?
Can I ask the subcommittee three sort of collateral issues that have come up, and I just want to know if you talked, first of all, the impact on the RENA numbers. Two, someone suggested that perhaps waiving fees would be beneficial. And then the third was what Carrie and I and we talked about a permit ready. Can you elaborate on any of those or all of them?
I'll start and let you finish. Yes, we discussed all of those. Yes, the RENA numbers, they do count, and I know Councilman Parent and I have both talked to this. I always say the state version of HUD, but that's not what it is. He has the right name, Mr. Metcalf. And when looked at housing goals, he indicated one thing that is really going to make a difference is ADUs. He said that's going to be a huge part of it. And we are attempting to do that with this ordinance. Regarding the, what was your second question?
Waiving permit. Waiving fees.
We discussed that, but right now La Mesa's fees are very low compared to the rest of the county. So we didn't feel like our permit fees were impairing the ability of people to build the ADUs. And yes, we did tell staff and task staff with working, there's grant money available through some of the organizations that spoke tonight, working towards having a plan ready, an Encinitas-style ADU. And so, yes, we discussed that. And to the speaker's comment, which is kind of piggybacks on this, regarding the fees and a certainty for the homeowners, we actually asked our staff to look at the hardest thing to figure out in any of these is grading. Grading is what can make and break any project, including your ADU project, and to try to give some ballpark figures to people so they know what they could be in for, depending on how much earth is being moved, how much grading they have to do, and everything else. So yes, we talked about all that. Do you have anything to add?
Just that, we also, when we talked about the fees, because, I initially thought, okay, well, let's do waive fees because some of the other jurisdictions are doing that. But yeah, our fees are, I think, the third from the bottom. They're really modest. And what basically I told staff is, like, if the fees were $40,000 a pop, like they are in some neighborhoods in San Diego, I'd be saying we're going to waive them. Like, that's crazy. But we're talking like, a couple $1,000s, right? So it can be different if there's grading permits. My understanding is, and that can be a more challenging cost, but otherwise they're relatively reasonable. And I did also hear from some folks who are pursuing ADUs or who are helping other homeowners to get ADUs that the barrier for them was not the fees; it's that they want to make sure that they get it processed in a quick and efficient manner. And if we waive the fees, that just means we have less resources to actually process these things. And so I think that might be. And we'd have to come up with the money or we'd have to come up with the money somewhere else. So I wasn't really persuaded that we had to do that. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Can I follow up something? We had talked about removing the pockets. Do you feel in the subcommittee that keeping those pockets is a compelling interest because it matches state law perfectly?
I don't think at the subcommittee level we considered keeping whether or not we would match state law perfectly. We were just mimicking state law and then making a decision based on that. But I think Councilman Parent has already indicated that he is in agreement, and so am I, that the pockets are kind of arbitrary and bizarre.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, I just really want to caution the council when we take out the requirement for home ownership and also that there's no limitation on the rental period, that we may be potentially opening ourselves up to a situation where we see in other areas in San Diego County. Since I'm a physician, I like to think of preventative things and use evidence-based with some of my decisions. And so since we know that this has been a problem in other areas, instead of necessarily taking the stance of if it becomes a problem, then we'll deal with it. We can always deal with it from the front end. I did look into, homeowners versus renters in La Mesa, and there are definitely more homeowners. I mean, in the 91941 zip code area, you've got over 7,400 owners versus 1,500 renters, and it's pretty much the similar in 91942. So when you put that requirement back in, it's not going to have a negative impact on the significant portion of those that live here in La Mesa. But, again, besides that, I think this is an amazing policy. I agree that we need to figure out a way to streamline it and make it more affordable in the future. But I do want to, just caution council that we see this and know we're not a part of the UC, but we're not that far away from SDSU. So keep that in mind as well.
Mr. Baber.
To continue your analogy, Doctor, perhaps we should have regular checkups. If we revisit this or got a report from staff every 2 years or 3 years to say, is this working, that would be fine, because we may find it's not working. So maybe there's a model of looking at it.
Maybe even 12 months.
That would be too.
There's no reason not to. So I feel confident that even with all of the potential, that there's enough that the city can do to make any necessary fixes. So I'm going to make a motion to adopt 10A, the ordinance of the City Council of La Mesa adopting the amendments of Title 24 zoning, the La Mesa Municipal Code for the development of the accessory dwelling units in accordance with California Government Code Section 65852.2.
Mayor, think I heard at least 3 ayes for removing the pockets. Will you add that?
Add that to.
Okay, I'll second it and add the removing the pocket.
Adopt
There's a
that.
better way of saying that, but you know what I'm talking about, Carrie.
But, so what we can do is we can have a friendly amendment?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So how about instead of removing the pockets, say that the parking requirement is removed from the ADU?
Will that accomplish the same thing, Carrie? And Mayor, you had mentioned earlier that adding to that, could we direct staff to return in
I'd like
12
to do
months?
that yeah, okay, yes, that staff return and do an assessment and give a report on 12 months on, first of all, if any ADUs have been added and what has happened in those situations and circumstances.
Okay, then, that's a motion and a second.
So just to matter of discussion, I'd love to. We actually got some data from staff in the subcommittee about the performance of the ADU production. So I definitely want to see what the potential impact is from what we have here, but also share. It'd be great to share even the kind of activity that has happened in this interim period where we're operating under the vanilla state code.
Any other discussion for 10A? Please vote.
Motion carries with all council members voting yes.
I'd also like to advance 10B, the ordinance of the City Council, the City of La Mesa, adopting amendments to Title 24 zoning, La Mesa Municipal Code for the development of junior accessory dwelling units in the accordance with California Government Code Section 65852.22. And I also want to add, let me see if there's a second on that first.
Second. I second. If we're having the same conditions of 10A and 10B.
Same conditions. In addition, I'd like to see part of that motion that the subcommittee bring back potential pre-approved plans. I'd like that to come back as well.
I think staff going to do that, or is the
yes,
but that's having the subcommittee direct.
I can go to online architecture school.
I think he's talking about the permit-ready ADUs, right?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Can I ask a clarification? So in our report, we're recommending that we look for grant resources for
grant resources for ADU-ready plans.
Okay.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean we wouldn't do it if it's not contingent on the grant resources.
No, but we're going to look for them.
We should always
see
look.
if it's revenue neutral.
Look for and then just on that point, let's we have at least one other jurisdiction in the region who's had pre-approved plans. If we can use them with their permission or not, I guess they're public documents now.
Legal land?
Yeah, Encinitas. Yeah. Well, and we're also very fortunate we also have our city attorney, also as a city attorney for Encinitas. Carrie, who would be leading this process for us, formerly did some of this work for the city of Encinitas. So I think we're well positioned to borrow them. I always want to caution. I'm always cautious about this idea that we have to overplan things and to do huge exercises when there's already pretty good work that's already been done that we can borrow.
Always best practices. Any other discussion? Please vote.
Motion carries with all council members voting yes.
Item 11,